What's up, everybody? Before we start this episode of the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast, I want to do the big giveaway for the month of April, even though we're now into May, but this is for the advanced copy of our friend Mira's book, The Houdini Club, The Epic Journey and Daring Escapes of the First Army Rangers. So I have all of our names in a bin here. We're going to give it a shaky, shake, 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 shake. I'm going to pull out a name here. And the winner is Mr. Connor Trent. Congratulations, sir. Connor Trent, you are the winner of the April giveaway of the Houdini Club. I will reach out to you on Patreon. Please log in and check your messages. I'll get your address and we'll get this book and some stickers sent out your way. Congratulations. And a reminder, if you guys wanted the opportunity to win on the next Patreon giveaway, please head over to whatsthescuttlebutt.com, what'sinyourhead.com, or d-410.com. Click on the Patreon link, sign up, and subscribe. All you have to do is be an active subscriber to be eligible for the next giveaway. Thank you guys so much. On with the show. So as somebody who's been carrying a firearm for over 13 years daily, one of the biggest inconveniences is when you come home, you need to take your firearm off of yourself and put it somewhere safe, somewhere secure, especially if you have kids. Now, I know most of us are responsible. We have a gun safe somewhere, but let's be honest, usually these gun safes are big, they're bulky, they're kind of out of the way because they're a bit of an eyesore. Your wife doesn't want them where everybody can see them, so sometimes they're in your closet behind some clothes, sometimes they're in the garage, sometimes they're in the mudroom. And let's be honest, taking your firearm out and walking to those locations to secure it is a pain in the butt, but you have to be a responsible firearm owner, especially have kids in the house. That's why you need to get yourself a Stopbox Pro portable gun safe. You can make it non-portable. You can drill some holes in it, mount it to a place of convenience in your house, but it requires no batteries and no electricity. You simply come in your house, walk up to your safe, choose your finger button combinations, open a safe, remove your firearm from your person, put it in the safe. If you close your safe, just that easy, it's secure. So do yourself a favor, head over to stopboxusa.com/D410 and get all the information today on your Stopbox Pro. When seconds count, trust the only non-fail firearm storage box, Stopbox Pro, at stopboxusa.com/D410.
Digital 410 Media proudly presents the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast with your hosts, Don Abernathy, Jeff Copsetta, and Dennis Blocker.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast, your favorite World War II based podcast, and we are back here for another wonderful episode. Joining me tonight, as always, Mr. Dennis Blocker. Dennis, what's going on in your world, fella?
Oh, just, working on the book, working at my employment, and had a great time with Jeff this past weekend at the Wings Over Texas, the Fiesta event here in San Antonio at Stinson Field.
How was that?
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. A lot of turnout, very large turnout. This is their second one. And, Jeff was there, and he's always got, great display, and he brought his Jeep. And we had some guys that he's been talking with that showed up dressed up as Tuskegee Airmen.
Nice.
They looked sharp. Yeah, it was awesome. So they took some great pics with some Texan, the trainer aircraft. Mm-hmm. There was a couple of them there, and so they were able to get in the cockpits and do their thing. And huge crowd of people gathering around to take a look. And I had some really great pictures with Jeff and one of his friends, an active duty colonel. And
good friend to have.
Yeah, for sure. And these Tuskegee Airmen guys, and they're kind of hunched down in front of this aircraft, this Texan, and they're putting their hands like they're describing diving on.
Yeah,
it was turned out great. You just hear the cameras, behind you, everybody gathering up and taking pictures, and it's cool.
I think my next event will be on June 6th, June 7th. Obviously D-Day, but more locally, I think we are going to have a farewell for another one of our reenactors who passed away. Now, his name was Jerry English. He was probably in his early 70s. He'd been participating in the community for a while. I believe he was a gym coach or some sort of teacher at a high school. I know he was beloved in his community to the point where the announcer's box at the local high school was called Jerry English. Is dedicated to him. But one of the nicest guys. I mean, when I started 12 years ago, obviously he was, late 50s, early 60s. And so he's always the nicest guy. Drove a Jeep, been around for years, but passed away. And so I think we here in the Florida reenacting community are going to bid a farewell to him on in the Zephyr Hills event. I just picked up, I've been looking at him for a while. At the Front has been making flannel uniform shirts. They look just like the wool, but they're flannel. For obviously, because as you can attest to being in Texas, it's hot, damn hot. And so the flannel has the appearance, and I'll be honest with you, I'm looking at it now. I haven't put any patches on it yet, but it looks like the wool. Yeah. And I'll be honest with you, there's a lot of guys in Florida who are young enough or their bodies are small enough that their bodies can accommodate original shirts. And my wool uniforms don't look so much like the original shirts as theirs do. And I'll tell you what, I think this flannel almost looks more like the original wool shirts than the modern day wool shirts do. Because like my modern wools are they're kind of thick, and to me this flannel looks more like the original wool type.
Where'd you pick that up at? At
the Front, same place we were talking about the Navy uniforms. And this one was on sale. I got the NCO version because obviously I do second lieutenant. That's why it has the shoulder parts on it. But yeah, so I put it on the mannequin to get the wrinkles out. I got to sew my Ranger Division on there, and I got new butter bars. And then I think this will be the first time I've worn an actual full wool uniform, even though that's flannel. Because all the other impressions I've done, just because it's Florida, I usually wear the HBT pants with the flannel shirt, kind of do the mid-war impression. But since this is D-Day, I'm actually going to have on the flannel pants the wool pants with the shirt and the M41 jacket, the whole 9 yards. And so that'll be in June. And then that's kind of it for Florida. We flip-flop, right? Texas is the same way. Up in Ohio, Tennessee, you get most of y'all's impressions are in the spring, summertime, and fall. Maybe more fall and spring. But down here in Florida, we try to do it in the wintertime because it's only a cool 80 degrees instead of 120. So,
right, yeah, exactly.
The first event I ever did was down in Naples about 13 years ago. And I was doing Marine Corps. I haven't done an Army impression yet. My first impression was Marine Corps. And no one was doing Marine Corps yet. The Pacific hadn't hit the heights it had hit. It hadn't quite blown up yet. Marine Corps uniforms weren't super available. And so, I was the only Marine at this event. And I met a guy named John Thompson, sadly, who passed away a couple months back, too. But he did first infantry and let me fall in his guys. But I say all that to say this. It was in a summer event. I'm the only Marine down there in my nice HBTs. You had all these guys doing airborne impressions and D-Day impressions, and it's hotter than hell. And they're all pouring water on their helmets, trying to cool them down from the hot sun. But I have the HBT cover on mine, so my helmet wasn't getting as hot. Those guys are hiding in their tents trying to get out of the direct sunlight because they're wearing the wool and all that. And I doing my Marine impression. So my impression was physically cooler than their Eastern impression because of all the wool and heavy garb. So that is the nice thing about doing Pacific and wearing HBT trousers. And so, yep, I got that coming up here shortly, and I'm looking forward to that. It's been a while. I don't think I've done any events since November. So it's just been hectic around here. But anyhow, we just want to remind everybody, we said we're going to do it at the end of April. Technically, there's 2 more days after the recording, so it's a giveaway for April. We're going to give the book actually away on the first episode of May, which technically will give you an extra week to sign up. So if you guys haven't done so, head over to WTSPWorldWar2.com or D-410.com. Click on the Patreon link or simply look for D410 Media on Patreon. Sign up to any of our tiers. We're going to give away the last remaining copy we have of the advanced, not for resale, copy of Mir's book, The Houdini Club. That was a great interview. That interview, by the way, is blowing up. The video interview is blowing up on YouTube. Some of the highest video views we've had on one of our videos in a while. But you guys want this awesome book, just go sign up and subscribe, any one of the tiers. And we don't bring it up a lot. I've decided I need to make some commercials. Dennis is wearing one right now. We do have shirts. we're really bad about self-promotion here. we don't beat people over the heads with saying, hey, buy Dennis's books, buy our shirts. We're usually promoting other people's stuff, which is great, but we do have books. You can reach out to Dennis on his Instagram page or send us an email to mailcall@wtspworldwar2.com if you want an autographed version of Dennis's book, or you can get on Amazon through the link on our website, or go to the merch link on our website. We have the WTSP shirt that Dennis is wearing there. We have the Red Ball shirt. We have a bunch of shirts, hooded sweatshirts, sock hats, windbreakers. Jeff loves the coffee mugs. All that stuff is available. WTSPWorldWar2.com. And while you're also there, click on the YouTube link or head over to youtube.com, look for D410 Media, and sign up and subscribe. And that is all the ways to help us here at the show to keep the channel going. Now that we got all that uncomfortable stuff out of the way, Dennis, you got some update, I guess, and you've had a lot of more projects going on. What's going on, fella?
Yeah, I'm just working on my next book about the gunboats at Iwo Jima, the February 17th, 1945 recon mission with the underwater demolition teams. I have, resurrected a bunch of the documents and binders and pictures and everything that I had in totes forever. The original plan years ago was to write that story, that book, right off the bat. When I wrapped up all of the then research on it back in 2016, but life happens, and then my dad wanted to write his memoirs of his time in Iraq and Afghanistan with war dogs during 05, 06 in Iraq, and then 2010, 2011 in Afghanistan. So I helped him with that, and we co-wrote those books together. Ended up being 2 books, and just tremendous experience being able to do that with my dad. And
absolutely,
computers side by side, both Mac desktops. So he had the ironic capability of airdropping chapters to me as we were typing away. And that was a great experience. And there's a lot of stuff on YouTube where we talk about those times. And then that kind of led me to think, man, I should write my book, my story about my time working in emergency medicine and battles with PTSD and whatnot.
Sure.
And I wrote my book Clear. And then I wanted to get my first book on a short story series. I've always wanted to do a short story series on World War II, kind of cool things that, and we've talked about it before, that maybe don't, there's not enough that you could do a, 300-page book, but something that is very interesting that people would find compelling, and that maybe is a part of the World War II history that is a little bit maybe unknown. And so I started that series a couple months ago, the Valor Vault series. Props to Jeff on giving me the idea and the title. And of course, that first book was Bonsai Cliff, Desperation's Edge.
And so your next book is the follow-up or number 2 in that series, correct?
Well, that was what I was thinking originally, and I already have book 2, 3, 4 research started on those different topics. But recently moving, I came across all of my research on the gunboats. Another reason that I waited a little bit was that I did The Heart of Hell with Mitch back in 2016. And so that story was of my grandfather's gunboat on this mission. But when I first did all the research between 2002 and 2016, and I interviewed over 100 World War II veterans during that time period, a lot more than 100, the idea was to tell the story of the entire group. So that's always been on my heart. And I did interview the guys to do that. So I picked that up, and I've been hitting that very hard the last several months. I've got a Excel spreadsheet that has the left column is the names of the ships or the units, for instance, UDT 12, 13, 14, 15. So they each have their own entry. Then all the LCI gunboats, all the destroyers are listed there, all of the destroyer escorts, which were command ships for each individual UDT team. Also the cruisers, battleships, minesweepers, anybody who was there on the 17th for this mission, they have an entry on the column on the left side going down. And then it was a matter of getting the action report and the deck log. And then for each one for the 17th, and then just starting at the top with each ship and entering in. So that if you can imagine, on the left column is the name of the ship, then I've tossed across the top, each column represents 5 minutes of time. And so anytime that something is mentioned, for instance, on the USS Bates, that happens there, that they put in their log, and fortunately some of these ships even kept radio traffic logs.
Wow.
And yeah, so that's very interesting. And so then I would plug in those entries into the ships, and
How
that's
does that radio traffic log read? Is it stuff do you kind of interpret it a little bit for the ease of the consumption
surprisingly
of the reader, or is it pretty
uh,
much easily understandable?
yeah, surprisingly, and very understandable. A lot like open traffic, like not code words, of course, for ships, but
Sure.
Swami 3 requesting direct fire on gun emplacement 193A. And so then that, but I have the map, right? I have the map with all the sectors, so I can see exactly where they're wanting to place fire, because LCI 441 reports receiving heavy artillery fire from cliffs.
I don't know if anybody would know this answer. I'm sure somebody would know this answer. I don't know this answer, and I wonder if you would. It would strike me as odd that they wouldn't have a shorthand, right? When the amount of messages being relayed, unless they did, and then somebody transcribed that back at headquarters for the official documentation. Did they have any sort of shorthand, or were these guys just writing us out longhand as fast as their pencil could scribe?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's written in a way that that it was taken down real time, and it wasn't. They didn't have time because then the 19th happens and the invasion. There's no time to go back and clean up the entries.
Well, I
So
just didn't know if there was a uniform code of shorthand, and then they sent it back. If it was transcribed at a later date.
these entries are recorded faithfully the way that it was said
That's
over
cool.
the radio. Yeah. So a lot of times there's even slang in
That's cool.
like some guy from New York is saying something from the Bronx.
These yokels are coming down our way.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you too, for those listening who maybe not familiar with the subject, UDP is, Underwater Demolition Crew, UDC. Is there any good? Do you know of a good book, or even I doubt there's a movie, at least not of that period of time. Obviously, we know the Charlie Sheen Navy SEALs movie and all that goofy stuff. But is there a good source of underwater demolition crews training, like their version of boot camp, and how, is there a good book that that someone could read up? Like if they're wanting to do an impression of an underwater demolition crew and want to get an idea of what their boot camps and their training missions were like and their selection periods, is there a good reference material for that?
Yeah, there is. Years ago, I contacted a lady who did a uh, almost, I would say, exhausted book on underwater demolition teams. She did two, and one of them was of the down in Fort Pierce, Florida, where they were training the UDTs. They had their own base paper, and so there's a lot of great entries in there about training and whatnot. Um,
That would be a good impression for us here in Florida to put together.
Absolutely.
Depending on what their uniforms consisted of and how hard it would be to complete that.
Swim in trunks, and that's it.
The underwater demolition teams, also known as UDTs, were formed during World War II in response to the need for specialized units capable of clearing obstacles ahead of amphibious landings. The origins can be traced back to 1943 during preparations of Operation Husky, the Allied invasion of Sicily. However, the concept gained formal structure following the heavy casualties of Tarawa in 1943, where it became clear that enemy defenses such as coral reefs and beach obstacles needed to be reconned and removed before a landing. The Navy established the UDTs in 1944, drawing personnel primarily from the Seabees, Navy Scouts, and other volunteers with swimming and demolition expertise. Trained at places like Fort Pierce, Florida, these elite teams operated in swim trunks, fins, and masks, earning themselves the nickname Frogmen. These Frogmen candidates underwent some of the most grueling unorthodox trainings of the war. This training took place at facilities like Fort Pierce, Florida, and included the following key components: combat swimming and endurance. Candidates were required to swim several miles in open water, often under heavy surf and at night, simulating stealth approaches under battle conditions. Demolition expertise. The trainees learned to handle and place explosives underwater using time fuses and primer charges. often while dealing with visibility issues and pressure changes. Obstacle identification and clearance. Emphasis was placed on recognizing various types of obstacles, mined steel tetradons, coral, stakes, and determining the best way to neutralize or avoid them. Candidates were also subjected to sleep deprivation, stress conditioning, and live fire drills to test their physical resilience. Team coordination. UDTs operated in tight-knit groups, where coordination, trust, and nonverbal communication was essential. The attrition rate was high, and only those who demonstrated exceptional courage, stamina, integrity completed the training. Unlike other special operation units, early Frogmen were not armed during the missions, relying solely on speed, stealth, and precision.
As far as movies, Richard Widmark did one back in the 50s, which was pretty good actually. And regarding books, there's several books out there on the UDT Frogmen.
Well, I was going to ask you too. Did the slang Frogmen come out of World War II, or was that acquired later?
Yeah, no, that was from World War II. The one that all the guys doing the research recommended was called Naked Warriors.
Gotcha.
Of course, it's going to disappear.
Actually, it did better when. Yeah, it's good right there. You can see it. Are they jumping out of a aircraft?
Yeah, this follows their history.
Okay, so that's more like Korean, Vietnam era.
Yeah. Well, no, it starts off with World War II.
No, I was talking about the picture on the cover because it looks like a helicopter,
Yeah,
unless
for
they're
sure.
jumping
That's
out
a
of it.
helicopter. That one's a highly recommended by guys who were UDTs themselves. They recommend that one. There's this one by Chet Cunningham called The Frogmen of World War II.
Did they have any specialized? Obviously, they had their own specialized equipment, but when it came to weaponry, were they more likely to carry like grease guns and Thompsons because they were smaller, or did they carry the carbines with the paratrooper stock?
Weapons. The only weapon they carried was a knife.
Okay,
and,
so it was basically they're focused on demolition, and if something happens, you better sort it out with a knife.
That's why the gunboats were there, was to keep the Japanese down and keep their attention off the Frogmen.
Gotcha.
And of course the knife really is only just in case they need to cut wire or rope or anything. They had a plexiglass, almost like a tablet that was strapped to their leg,
With
and
a grease
grease
pencil?
pen.
Nice.
Yeah, grease pencil. Yeah, and a satchel. They would collect samples from the beach or and this and that, and they had a little twine with the lead at the bottom, and they would make measurements of the grade of the beach, and then they document it. And if there was mines, they had explosives that they would take with them. They'd haul explosives and which with mortars.
So is it fair to say that they did more than just clear underwater mines, that they were kind of used as a pre-invasion, underwater surveying group to get an idea of what the conditions were for the landing crafts?
That was exactly what they were. They wanted to give the landing force peace of mind that regardless of what the Japanese were going to do, they would at least geographically going to be able to get to the beach. They would know, and at Guam they blew up hundreds of Japanese defenses that had been put out into the reef, and they blew up channels so that the ships would be able to get in.
How early would they be deployed? Was this like 2 days before, 3 weeks before? How far early on in the planning stages were they utilized in getting this information for the landings?
Sure. For like at Guam, it was like 4 or 5 days before, and a week before. And they, as a matter of fact, my grandfather's gunboat group, they were working around the clock, and they were actually ordered to sleep at their guns. So the Frogmen were working all night, even through the night, and the gunboats were there just laying down heavy fire over their heads and just keeping the Japanese down and occupied. And they didn't lose any Frogmen at Guam.
What sort of, because it's interesting to try to think, obviously nowadays underwater gear just in general, whether it's military or recreational, is far surpassed. But I think sometimes when people look back on World War II, they almost don't give it enough credit for, advanced technology. Now, some people think clearly not iron bell helmets, but what type of gear did the underwater demolition crew have as far as breathing apparatuses and just gear of itself for being in the water and working underwater all day long?
Yeah, nothing like that. It was just a face mask and flippers if they were lucky, and the plexiglass and the knife, and they had a little satchel like I mentioned before. But as far as like the Navy SEAL gear where they can stand breathing and there's no bubbles for the Navy
Yeah,
SEAL
sure.
apparently.
But did they have like a
Um,
single air tank, like like
Nothing, no
so?
tanks.
So that wasn't even a thing then. Just a
No,
snorkel or hold your breath.
hold your breath. And they were shocked when they jumped in the water at Iwo because they had been training at Ulithi and the water was warm, and they jump into this water at Iwo Jima. It's February and it
Ooh,
was ice cold. It was in the 50s, the
cold
water.
water plunge.
So the guys, as a last ditch effort, covered their bodies with grease and to try and at least give them an extra layer. And yeah, I mean, there's no mistake. I think was it Ernie Pyle maybe. One of the correspondents said that the UDT frogmen were half fish and half nuts, and that was kind of a requirement. They had to be half fish and half nuts.
Yeah, I bet. See
Yeah.
if I can find that quote. Let's see here. Yeah, no, that's because that is such a topic that has very little mainstream coverage in any real way, shape, or form, right? Compared to other aspects and other groups of the era. I mean, we all know the phrase frogmen, but I think, let's be honest, most of cats our age and a little bit older, we just know that from G.I. Joe cartoons in the 80s.
Yeah, for
And so,
sure.
unless you're
Well,
around for that movie in the 50s,
In the Atlantic theater, they were called NCDUs, not Naval Combat Demolition Units. In the Pacific, they were called UDTs. Um, they were there at Normandy. If you remember that scene from, maybe this will jostle folks' memory, but that scene from Saving Private Ryan where the guy's got the helmet on and it's got that orange kind of, I don't know what you'd call that shape on his helmet, but and he yells at them, get away from
they were
this,
the
I
two
gotta
guys that
clear.
were next to the steel axe. What do they call those? Oh, I went completely blank. But yeah, the anti-tank traps. They were the two guys by that, correct?
Yeah, and he tells them because they're bunching up, and he tells Tom Hanks' character to move somewhere else because he's got to clear these
Yeah.
obstacles, get moving. And he reaches up in his helmet and he pulls out that charging primer cord, which he's going to use to detonate the explosives that he's packing around the. But so, that was their, you know, D-Day function at Iwo Jima. Not, I don't cover this in my book, but something that they were used at Iwo Jima, which was very interesting, was that all of the smashed vehicles on the beach, there were hundreds of them, turned over and this and that. What the frogmen ended up doing was they tried blowing up the vehicles that were stranded, just blow them up and get them rid of them that way. But obviously, they quickly found that creates shrapnel, which is flying through the air,
Yeah.
and then you got to make sure everybody's clear, and it's just a big waste of time. So what they ended up doing was all the LCI gunboats that weren't currently on fire missions, they would come up because they can get all the way up there, and the frogmen would take the anchor cable from the front of the bow of the gunboat, and they would wrap it around whatever vessel they wanted to pull off. And that's what they would do, is they would rig it in a way that it would they could chop the line. Of course they weren't using the anchor, but they would chop it, and they were pulling off all this wreckage, and it was just fast. They were able to do it very quickly and keep the beaches open so that more
Mm-hmm.
supplies could come in and keep coming in. It's pretty awesome.
Facilitators of supply.
Yeah, exactly. So, but that's been a lot of fun, as far as UDT guys, and plugging in all the deck logs and all that. But it did reveal to me that I had some gaps in my research, and it had been so long since I'd looked at it. And I started writing. I actually took a week off of work about a month and a half ago or so, and quickly became evident that I had been premature and wasn't ready to write it yet.
Now,
Um,
when that happens, is that deflating or is that motivating? Like, oh, sweet. Does it kind of get you sparked interest again, or is it like, crap? Now I got to go back and my timeline's messed up for your
well, it's
book
kind of a
itself.
bummer at first because I specifically took off work to get going and I was super excited about it. And of course, you're telling your buddies, yeah, I'm going to start writing. And um, but then it's also a blessing, like you said, because it makes you get back immersing into it again. And and what it's done for me is I've been able to get a lot more material that I didn't even have before. And I with my newfound ways of finding people using things that we've talked about on here, I've been able to. Matter of fact, just as an illustration, since we were talking about the UDTs, um, I have to tell their story as well.
Yep.
And so I've got the crew roster for the UDT 12 and just went down the line, just contacting, sending out emails, getting responses. And one guy on this past Friday, I got a package from him in the mail, and it's from like just months after this happened at Iwo Jima. They put together, one of the guys realized that what they had done was historic. And shortly after World War II was over, months after it was over, he put this together and he sent out questionnaires to the Frogmen, and they sent him their remembrances of Iwo Jima and this and that. So he sent me this binder with all of these guys' firsthand accounts that aren't
Wow.
50-year-old accounts. These are months out. And it's just adding appreciably to it's just going to make it so much better.
So you got
So that
access to
fired me
fresh
up.
in the mind recollections and not hazy, 50 years later, where sometimes the story gets altered a little bit through just
Sure.
human
And then you
memory.
kind of got to fill the gaps from doing a little bit more research. And well, then that, of course, makes me curious. Well, if Team 12 did that, I wonder if 13, 14, and 15 did. So then researched yesterday, as a matter of fact, and found out that a guy on Team 13 put together a history, which I've heard from a newspaper article I found is over 1,000 pages. And so that's what I'm working on right now, is contacting families and just trying to get a copy of that that I can use, because um, it'd be great if I can take the reader along as a frogman and stick them in the cold water while the gunboats are doing their thing.
When you're organizing this material and trying to figure out the continuity of your book, and you see you have holes. The only thing I've never written a book. The only thing I can relate to is I've edited hours worth of video. And for example, when I do my fishing videos, I'm doing a 3 camera shoot. I have 3 different cameras on my kayak, and then when I get home, I gotta go through all the footage of the 3, delete the crap, and then when I'm trying to edit a video, I'm putting things together, and then I realize, well, camera wasn't on when X, Y, and Z happened. But what it allows me to do when I'm laying it out, and then I can see the holes,
Mm-hmm.
it almost makes itself evident
For
of
sure.
how this story is either going to be arranged or what I need to go back and either put in an editor's note or create some B-roll for it, or it changes the narrative that I thought I was going to be able to put together, but perhaps a different story or a better version of that story comes out due to what availability material I have and what I either may need to produce or rejigger so that the missing content doesn't affect the storyline. Is that kind of what you deal with when you're trying to figure out the continuity of your books?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, Don. And that's why it's so important. It is a time consuming effort that must be done, but you have to do the timeline. You have to do the action reports. You have to make every entry must be put in, because that's going to show you where your holes are at.
How do
And
you how do you
then,
force
for
yourself
instance,
to
if the
slow down?
438 says at 11:04 they got hit on the bow, and the bow gun number 140 was knocked out, well, then of course, okay, who was on the number 140? So you get the list of the names of the guys, and then you start sending out, you know,
How do you force yourself to slow down? Obviously, you self-published, right? So you're not worried about meeting timelines from a publisher. You're excited about the material. Obviously, when it comes to video or music or whatever, it's quicker and easier to produce. But even when I'm editing a video, I gotta say, hey, if you take the excitement out of this and let it breathe, your final product will be so much better than trying to get it done just for the sake of getting it out. Obviously, a book's different, but it's not that different because you love the subject matter. You're part of a podcast. One of the things we do on the podcast is we love sharing stuff that we love with other people. But how do you, Dennis, as an author, say, hey, Dennis, slow down. Let's let this stew marinate. Let's make sure all the ingredients are correct so that when we're putting in someone's bowl, it's the best damn stew we have and not just, hey, check out my stew, guys. It's great. How do you force
Right.
yourself to slow down and know when your project is ready to be served?
Personally, the way that I slow down is that I personally talk to these guys, and they're all gone now, and so I feel the weight of making sure I get it right. And you have to have personal integrity in that regard, because really the could I put out a manuscript right now and get it knocked out, and it would be good. It would be something people would say, wow, that's amazing and that's great. But I would know in my heart that it's not right. It's not good to go. And there's so I take the time to do this extra months of
You would
research. It
taste
is
it like,
painful.
this is not enough salt. You would know.
Yeah,
Everybody else would
exactly.
know. Hey, it tastes great now. It's missing some oregano and a little
Yeah,
bit of salt.
exactly. That's a really good analogy. It's like a chef who's will know that no, this sure I won the contest, but in my heart I know it wasn't the best that I could have done. And of course, there is a point where you do have to pull the plug, right? You got to say, all right, now I could research this for 40 years and still find stuff, but I've done this enough that I know when I get to that point, and I'm not there yet. A good illustration is this book right here. It's called Iwo Jima Recon. Can you see it okay?
Yeah, don't move. It's perfect.
Okay. The title says Iwo Jima Recon, the U.S. Navy at War, February 17th, 1945. Um, the fellow who did this, he's got some great maps in here, amazing layout, great pictures. Um, but these are not LCI gunboats. And this is not February 17th, right? These are LCS. They weren't there on the 17th. They weren't there on the 18th. They were there on the 19th. So this is not, it'd be fine if it was just, it wouldn't even be fine really if it was Iwo Jima. It should be just Iwo Jima.
Yeah.
Then fine. That's fine. The U.S. Navy at
But
war.
when you put a date on there,
But you put recon and you put the date. This didn't happen. And then on the inside, he repeats Samuel Eliot Morrison's history on the mission, and he says that the LCI 409 had 60% casualties. Well, the 409 wasn't there, wasn't even in that theater, right? It was the 449. Morrison got it wrong. Everybody, instead of doing more homework, quotes Morrison, and you see it in newspaper articles from that time, and even now you'll see LCI 409 pop up. This here,
yep.
this is LCI 708. Weren't there. 708 is a bow LCI. It is an LCI where the doors open on the bow. Those weren't there until days later.
Do you think due to the published date on that book, do you think a lot of the inaccuracies in the photos is strictly just what they had access to and looking to fill the pages?
It could be. It could be. And the thing is that they're really nice pictures.
Yeah.
And the layout of this is gorgeous. And the fact that now see this picture here. This is correct. That's Daryl Hewish. He was on the 474. He was killed in action. That's him laying there dead on the deck of the 474. And then this picture here on the bottom is from the 17th of February, 45. This right here,
Yep.
not February 17th. That's the LCI 708 again. So sure, they're great pictures and they're compelling, but I can guarantee you that if this was the 17th of February, those guys would not be leisurely standing there and that beach would not look so serene.
Yeah.
These guys would all be hunkered down, or they'd probably be dead. Um,
It's like the literature equivalent when you're watching a History Channel show on Guadalcanal, but they're showing Marines with M1s and then
for sure.
the helmet covers. It's like, okay, well that footage is from Peleliu or Tarawa. It's like, okay, well I guess it's probably only video footage they had access to when producing this show. So,
Mhm.
but yeah,
I don't know if the fellow who did this, if he hired a team to get him pictures from the archives, but
could be just the publisher house did it. He might have just supplied the manuscript, and the publisher's like, okay, we
yeah, that
get the
could
art
be.
department on it.
There are at least a couple dozen pictures here that are not from the 17th.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's beautifully done, but that's kind of like a gauge for me too on making sure I get it right. There's always going to be errors in this and that, but
Sure.
no one's ever going to be able to say that it's not thoroughly researched.
Especially the
Anything
further
that I
out you
put out.
get from it. Kind of like we were talking about with Mir a few weeks ago, is, we can only relay the information that we have access to and the information we were able to acquire. But, and you talk to any cop, right? You get an eyewitness statement from 4 different people who just saw something happen 15 minutes ago, and they all have a different
For sure.
they all have a different telling of the event. And so your body does crazy things to you to try to, hide from trauma, or, you see things in a different way. And so, I mean, if you see that 20 minutes after an accident, you can only imagine how things change years and in a lifetime ago.
Yeah. So that's what I've been working on, and you have that integrity thing where sometimes you get some really great stories that somebody mentions in a interview, but they don't say the name and they can't place the time. And so I can't use it, and that really, really sucks because I know it's a great little nugget, but if I can't put what ship it was or what time what hit it was associated with, then, I have to think of another way of wording it where I can say that it's an event that happened, but some time period during that, um, there's just you just have to have integrity on how you lay it out because for one, all these guys are all gone now that I interviewed, and there's over 100 and goodness gracious 40-50 guys. And yeah, one thing though, I think I'm going to call the book Sitting Ducks. And I got that from all the guys. And even the funny was, even the other day, one of the families, I found the family of the captain of the 441 gunboat, and I was talking to his daughter-in-law, and she was talking to me, and she dropped that line, and she says, they were just sitting ducks out there. And I started laughing, and I says, man, you do not know how many times that phrase came up when I was interviewing these guys. Those guys described their own experience. They were sitting ducks. And Charlie Crandall was the engineering officer on the 471, and he hated that I was going to call it the Sitting Ducks because he was just, he hated that title. He said, that makes it sound like we weren't fighting. And I was like, no, it's
a testament to your bravery, right?
mm-hmm.
And to that note, let me ask you this: we've all heard the famous story from the Airborne. All the reason I signed up to be Airborne is the extra $50 a month. I think I think Mayor might have mentioned the Rangers got a little bit of extra a month for hazard pay. Was the underwater demolition crews, were they in that category of hazard pay jobs, or was this just another job in the Navy and you made the same as the guy, driving, a landing craft or, swabbing the deck? Was this a hazard pay job?
Yeah, I can't speak to that. Yeah, I wish I knew that answer. That's a good answer. Actually, I'm going to write that down and look that up because that'd be good to put in there.
And because clearly this is another one of those necessity, is the mother of invention, right? Warfare's changed dramatically from 1915, 1916 to 1942. You have all this new technology, and then you have to come up with ways to beat the new technology. And so obviously Airborne was relatively new. Rangers, behind enemy lines, we're talking about the Merrill's Marauders. The concept of American commandos was relatively new. I'm sure Frogmen was extremely new. And so you have all these guys, all these young guys. Not only are they put into a new situation, but they're kind of making it up as they go along, and at least in the early stages. And to do this stuff without, years of experience, right? Our modern day soldiers, they go to boot camp, and whatever their job entails, whatever the current status is, that is built off of years and years of learning and failures and success. Okay, we're going to take all these failures, all these success, we're going to weed out what doesn't work. And as long as we follow this to a T, it's going to greatly increase your ability to accomplish your task and survive through it, right? But then it's like, okay, that's always kind of, when it comes to the military, it's always kind of interests me. It's like, we know, okay, the government, military, science, whatever, but at the end of the day, it's like, who's actually the guy, right? Who's the guy who came up? There's a great video on YouTube. I got excited because I thought it was this Pine Island, but there's another Pine Island in Florida. I found a video where they were field testing uniforms to be used in the Pacific. Figure out, okay, wool doesn't work. We want HBTs. These canteens don't work. And when you think about that logistically, it's like, okay, Dennis, it's 1939. You're tasked with forming an underwater demolition crew. Okay, what does that entail? This, and this. Get it done. Where do you go? Do you go to Florida and talk to, marine biologists or guys who build docks and seawalls and piers and bridges and get like their contracting expertise? Do you talk to EOD guys who do it on land and try to figure out how? It amazes me. We just assume all, like anything else, this shit just doesn't appear. Someone's got to come up with these policies. And when you don't have history, when you're creating something new, it's mind blowing to think of the guys who come up with these policies and test them and figure out what works and what doesn't. And you kind of hear it right in Band of Brothers. Oh, we went to jump school. Little did we know our jump leaders, they just got their wings 3 weeks ago. It's like, who taught the guy who taught them? It's amazing how they were able to do this in such a short period of time and be, for the most part, successful at it.
Yeah. Yeah, the guy that organized it was Draper Kaufman. His dad was a admiral, and Draper Kaufman had actually been sent to England before America's entry to the war, and he started out in bomb disposal, and he was, he'd go to those bombs in London and disarm them, and he had nerves of steel, just steady hand, nerves of steel, and it was his idea to come up with these frogmen, and so he came up with Hell Week, which is still around today for the Navy SEALs. He put the guys through Hell Week and to try and break them and see if he could get them to quit. And but like you said, a lot of it was, let's put some explosive on these pylons and let's see what happens and what amount we put. And sometimes they put too much, and we're kind of shocked.
Yeah, I guess you'd have to reverse engineer a lot of it, right? Okay, well, we want to figure out how to dispose of this bomb, so let's go talk to the guys who build the bombs.
For sure.
We want to figure out how to take down a pier the most effective way, so let's go talk to the engineers who build piers and figure out, okay, well, they can tell you, well, if you want to take out a pier that's 200 yards long, you need to take out these pilings every 50 feet or whatever. So I'm sure that had a lot to do with it too, right?
It's interesting to look at the ratings of the guys that were in the UDTs. Because they were originally signed up for whatever, and gunner's mates or boiler makers and this and that, and a lot of the guys that ended up in UDTs were Navy Seabees.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah,
probably the Navy Seabees have gotten a lot of trouble, who are a little more adventurous than the rest.
Oh, these guys were animals. They were all insane, just like they are today. Just like a whole new breed of guys that are just these super alphas and just not afraid of anything and always pushing the limits. And let's see what happens if we put an extra couple pounds on this. Let's just see what happens. Wild.
I wonder what the average time that those guys could hold their breath for underwater. I mean, I'm sure they probably had a standard.
Yeah.
You're not gonna train somebody who can go for 30 seconds. You want the guy who has the big lungs. With that being said, I wonder. We all know that the sailors, the Navy men, and the Marines were all issued cartons of cigarettes. I wonder if they kind of said, "Hey, fellas, slow down a little bit so you can hold your breath longer." Or if it's like, "Here's your 2 cartons, get to it."
Yeah, no, they didn't stop smoking, that's for sure. At Saipan, they actually tried, and you were talking about innovation and this and that, but Saipan, they used something called a floating mattress. They tried it out, and it was it was like a mattress, and they would lay down on it, and it had a little motor on the back of it, and they tried, to decrease their profile, so they would lay on this mattress and they'd zip around through the surf, and it was a total disaster. They were just constantly getting electrocuted by the motor, and it was constantly just just shorting out and just electrocuting the crap out of them the whole time. So they ditched the idea, but they tried it out. Someone says, "Let's try this." So,
You ever see the video? There's a video, you've probably seen it. It was testing equipment. Someone tried to make like aluminum sleds hooked on chains that they'd pull behind tanks, so that the tank infantry guys would lay in them and be kind of bulletproof. But it clearly didn't work out too well. But it was like had 8 or 9 of them daisy chained to a tank, and these guys are laying on these sleds. You just had to try everything at that point.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Here's another book on the Frogmen. This one's from the 50s. It's got showing the UDTs. The first page shows UDTs on the beach at Iwo Jima, clearing half submerged ducks. And the second page shows the famous Capra picture at Omaha Beach of the guys walking ashore there.
Now, let me ask you this. So the UDT crews were sent out.
Copyright 1964.
An LCI or an what kind of vessel were the UDT guys on?
Yeah, so they originally started out on just like on a destroyer, but they had some destroyer escorts that were available. Production was 44 was full swing, so they gave them some fast destroyer escorts and DEs, and they gave them the Bar, the Blessman, the Bates. And so each team had one of these, and it worked out.
How big was
fabulous.
the team? Was I guess my question is, you have your specialist, right? They're on the boat. Their job is getting water. You were saying earlier that your grandfather would sleep by their guns while the guys were in the water all day. What was the division on that vessel? Were they all trained? Were most of them trained in UDT, or was like there 5 or 6 guys who were assigned to a vessel to go out and do, what was the actual size of each group of UDTs that were assigned to a vessel to go get a particular job done?
Yeah, they'd have as much as 100 guys on a team.
Okay.
But
I didn't know if they're kind of like a special group where they would take 6 or 7 of them, send them out on a, LCI.
So particularly at Iwo Jima, they had the morning recon mission on the eastern beaches, and then the afternoon recon on the western beaches. So, you only had, all the guys partook in some way or another, but they have these fast LCPRs, and they had 250 cals in them. And so UDT guys manned those, and they on the LCPRs, they'd have some of the UDTs were assigned to do radio that day, or to serve as almost like lifeguards, and they had spotters and camera guys and this and that. So just like any other unit, they had their medical people, and they had their tech guys, and they had their but as far as and that's the beauty of the idea of giving these guys their own ships, because then they integrated with the crew of the ship, and they'd have this whole ship. They can do training and exercises, and it worked out beautifully.
Handsome Harry liked to dance at every chance, but the girls all passed him by, poor old guy.
Hey, Zeke, if Harry was so all-fired handsome, how come the gals wouldn't dance with him? B.O. I get it.
You don't have to have B.O. for with Lifebuoy it will go, and the scent sure vanishes away.
Don't risk offending. Take a daily bath with a new Lifebuoy. You'll notice right away
its clean scent tells you it stops B.O., that in double quick time that scent will go.
That's because Lifebuoy now is better than ever. It's new, different. Here's why.
New added ingredient.
New vanishing scent.
Same protective lather.
From head to toe, it stops B.O. Get several cakes of the new Lifebuoy today.
From your head down to your toe, Lifebuoy stops at OVO, and the scent sure vanishes away.
Remember, Lifebuoy is the only soap especially made to stop.
When Rogue Heroes came out, we sung the praises on this show. And I know season 2 is out now, but it's been moved to a different streaming service that I don't have. But the reason I'm bringing that up is I can imagine you could almost take these young guys on these, underwater demolition teams and make a TV show in that styling of the Rogue Heroes with these, these wild young guys just out to get the job done in as we were saying earlier, in a organization that didn't previously exist, and kind of see them hopping on these fast boats and just getting the job done, and having, once again, in that type of job, clearly you're driven, you're trained, you know what the hell you're doing, but you got to have a little bit of that, let's, we're invincible, don't give a shit attitude, right? And so it would be, I could see you don't, a production being made almost in that fun, crazy stylings of the Rogue Heroes TV show, which if you haven't seen it, it is a fantastic show.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen it.
It's about the British Special Forces and how the SAS and how they came to be. It's a very, very good show. The reason I say it's the way the show's done in a not whimsical way, but I don't know about season 2, but season 1, the entire soundtrack was AC/DC, which clearly isn't error correct. But when you see these guys on a Jeep shooting 30 cals and just having desert warfare and doing sabotage missions, the Thunderstruck and shit like that, you're like, okay, this works. And so, it's a really, really well done show. And so, yeah, it'd be kind of cool to see a show, something like this, handled in that manner. It'd be, once again, it's subject matter that no one's talked about, because you often think, well, how many World War II shows and movies? A lot. There's still a lot that has been covered. There's still a lot of guys who did a lot of jobs that we haven't talked about. And this would be another one of those subject matters that would make for a fun, interesting, and original storyline.
Yeah. I mean, just imagine, my idea for the short story series. Imagine a miniseries like that, where it's just kind of like the Untold Stories of World War II, miniseries, where each episode is just a different thing, where you could do the bonsai cliff with the Japanese civilians, and
And much as I would hate to put our friends like Scott Gibson and Dale Dye out of work, but with AI you could produce that with a very low budget now, because you could just, it could all be generated, the video footage, the B-roll could be generated at such a lower cost now, like if you're trying to do it independently, right? So now you don't have to spend hundreds of $millions on George Lucas's CGI crew, or trying to rent, landing craft and finding 200 reenactors who have all the uniform. You can just produce it all on AI and get that story out there at a more cost-effective rate.
Yeah. Some of that stuff's it's impressive.
Yeah. It's a little scary. Not to get off topic, but it's kind of on topic. I do IT work and more internet security stuff. My boss has been giving lectures around the country on AI. And for the first time, I heard him say this is kind of scary, because he's been pro AI. He was out on his boat down here in Southwest Florida, took a picture of him and his wife. Now, they're just standing on the back of their boat. All you see is water, a little bit of shoreline, and some vegetations. There's no lighthouse. There's no restaurant. There's no landmarks of any kind. His boat, his American flag on the back of the boat, some water, and some scrub. Uploaded that photo in a ChatGPT, and it told him where that photo was taken within like 2 miles. And no, there was no metadata location added to the photo. It started talking about the color of the water. It could determine the vegetation on the beach and where that vegetation is from. And it said, you could possibly be here off Cape Coral, but no, you're up here off of Naples. It knew within a mile based on nothing but vegetation and the color of the water.
Wow.
And it's like, wow. And
I don't use AI when I'm writing. I don't.
Yeah.
It's so lame. But all my writing is just from my head. I don't use AI. I don't use AI even to spruce up my writing, to make it more. I mean, I maybe I should. I don't know, but I just don't want it to have that tainted on there at all.
Well, and to that point now, they are starting to put thumb fingerprints on it so that college professors and all that can do a better job. Or even, if you're trying to hire a writer for your magazine or your website, you want to make sure their thoughts are original. It's one thing to have something check your grammar and proofread, to kind of like have a robotic editor,
Sure.
if you will, but to have it rewrite your story, you definitely don't. You definitely want to stay away from that. But
Yeah, no way.
the stuff is moving at such a fast clip.
Hmm.
It's moving, and it's just like every day I'm just glad. It's like, I'm glad I was born in
I just keep thinking
1978.
of Wally, like that spaceship with all the people that are just laying there because everything is done for them, and it's like, man, people are their brains are just so devoid of information, and there's no desire to learn, and it's just, man, why would you just be content with the computers doing everything for you and figuring everything out, and not
Right, and that's a problem.
putting
It's like,
knowledge into your noggin?
I heard a great quote, and it don't matter when you're around. It doesn't matter if this is 1895, 1912, 1943. At any point in humankind, technology, the whole purpose of technology is to make life easier. And that made sense when we're scraping and hunting and gathering.
Sure.
And but we've gotten to the point now, no, well, why should I leave my house to get food? Let me
Yeah,
have it
exactly.
brought to me.
Have drones to bring it to you.
We went fishing this weekend, me and Mike, and his niece is in town. You want to go kayak fishing? Sure. She's 13. So I bring my kayak. I played this game with my own daughter. I know better, but whatever. She gets on the kayak. She wasn't afraid of the water. Wasn't afraid of the kayak. She paddled that thing twice. Said, nope. He tied that kayak to the back of his and paddled her around all day long. Once again, she wasn't afraid of the water. She just was not down for the physical exertion of paddling her own kayak. And in the video I just uploaded, and we don't make any reference to it, you'll see Mike and you'll see her on the back kayak on her phone on the water in Southwest Florida, the same place where people in Ohio and Tennessee save up like 2 years worth of tax returns and all their bonuses to bring their kids for a family vacation.
Sure.
And I told Mike, I said, here's the hierarchy of everything, right? But for fishing, and I say this all the time, when you're on a kayak and you're out there, you see the guy fishing on the shore. The guy in the shore wishes he was in the kayak. The guy in the kayak wishes he was in the boat. The guy in the boat wishes he was on the bigger boat. And so it's like, we're going down, and here's these guys on the shore fishing, and they're just staring at her saying, I would give anything to be on that boat. She's on that
Yeah.
kayak on a cell phone, and I could be out there catching me some snook or jack. And it's just like, and she had a good time per se, but the idea of doing any physical labor, nope.
Well, even to get, man, even to into that point, it's like I like to listen to and watch this. This is way off topic. Kill
That's all right.
Tony, which
Yep.
is the
Yeah, well, watch Kill Tony.
yeah, Kill Tony. It's just great. And part of the interview when Tony when he interviews the comedians after their 1 minute speech or diatribe, he questions them about their life, and these guys are 24 and 26, and he says, tell me something interesting about yourself. What is it about yourself that is just amazing, that is just gonna impress us? And they got nothing. Like, they smoked weed, or they walked around the park, or they just smoke weed or play video games, or they and I'm like, goodness gracious. Like, what astounds me is just this no desire to have adventure.
Yeah.
Like, just to be totally fine with, like, I hope this doesn't sound wrong, but like, to get to your end of your life and to have your life be represented in a pamphlet
Yeah.
and not a multi-chaptered mini-series book, volumes of things that you accomplished, places that you went, mistakes that you made, bad decisions that you made, the risks that you took that didn't work out and those that did, and your trips to Alaska and to Africa and to climbing a mountain range and taking your dog to a state park and camping overnight and being attacked by a bobcat in the middle of your camp, or you know what I mean? It's like
I
there's
heard a
just
quote,
no
and I don't know who said
desire
it.
for that. It just blows my mind that people are so content out of mediocrity and not making an imprint at all with the breath that they've been given for this housing unit called the human body, and it just
I don't
astounds
know.
me.
I don't know if it was Lazarus Lake, the creator of the Barkley Marathon, who said it, or somebody else. I was watching a video. It was an older guy, kind of crazy, and he said, "You are the director of your own life, and at the end of the day, your movie sucked. That's because you're a horrible director." And it's
So
so.
good.
And now for y'all at home, I'm not bagging on computer guys. Before the show, I was showing Dennis the Squad 44. I've been playing Grand Theft Auto RP, but I'm down to I put a time limit on it. And I make myself go out and run 4 miles or work out for an hour before I play video games. I tell myself I got to earn it. So I haven't traded in anything. But
Yeah, I
back
do
in
the
the
same. I
day,
mean, I've been putting in
in
an
my
hour or two this week on Lara Croft Tomb Raider.
in my mid 20s and early 30s, I would go to work and then I would come home and play Call of Duty 4 hours a night. And then on Saturday, it was 16 hours and just ordering Taco Bell. And I went from 175 and I gained 60 pounds. And then between typing and playing Xbox all day, I got carpal tunnel. I dropped stuff. And so I stopped playing video games for like 2 or 3 years. And so, but I'm not railing on it. But what at that time I discovered, I had a thought and I read, holy shit, I'm getting older. I skateboarded from 3rd grade until I was 21. I snowboarded my freshman year until I moved to Florida in 2001. My knees are pretty well shot. I've been running for 13 years. I know that when I get older, I will probably have to have knee surgery and wheelchair bound, right? And I understand that video games are going to be pretty fucking cool when I'm 75. So I've decided that when I'm 75, I don't want to be upset saying, I spent my prime sitting on the couch. Now that I can't walk, all I want to do is be outside. So no, I try now. I run, I go fishing, I do World War II reenactings, and then occasionally I'll play some video games. But now I flipped it to, I want to save my video game years for when I can't walk, when I'm in 70 and 80, because the shit's going to be super crazy. But to that point, we all got to get outside, man. We all got to go out and enjoy the sun, and we've talked about on the show, we've talked about it so many times. When you go out to a World War II reenactment, right, and you're sleeping in that tent on that ground, it sucks. You're tossing and turning, but there's something about waking up at 5 in the morning, because that's as long as you can go sleep in a tent, unless you're on a cot, even that's uncomfortable. But there's something about sleeping on the ground, waking up and drinking that black coffee. And even though by Sunday your body hurts, you're tired, Monday, you feel like a whole new person. You're like just being outside, being on the dirt, not being in front of a TV. If you have enough willpower and enough love for the hobby that you're not going to be that guy on your phone all weekend, trying to be authentic. It's a refresher, and it doesn't even have to be World War II. It could be going running. It could be just going fishing. It could be walking your dog. It could be sitting outside and painting a landscape. You got to get outside. You got to move, and you got to do things. And being inside is not. It's not the end all be all. It's a huge.
Get outside.
It's
Go to a
waste.
book talk. Go to a coffee shop and meet somebody, some people, or join a club, or just get some different experiences and just.
I'm gonna
Get
wrap
out
the
of the
show up on
house
this
and
observation,
be
and we
depressed
won't.
all the time and sad and
Yeah.
get some sunlight.
WLVN 1940s Radio, the place to go if you want authentic, real-time 1940s music, sports events, news, and much more. If you have a World War II event coming up, and as much of us do at our Living History events, sometimes we get a nice old-fashioned radio. We'll put a Bluetooth speaker in it, and we'll stream some appropriate music. Problem is every once in a while when you're streaming that music, a Pandora ad might kick in, or a YouTube ad, or whatever host commercial from where you're playing this music, unless you've taken the time to record your own music and save it as a file. We can do you one better. Head over to WLVN 1940s Radio, or simply click the link on our website. Go and stream their music live. Thanks to the station manager over at WLBM, Mr. Anthony Leota, who has painstakingly taken his time to get authentic sports events, radio broadcasts, news broadcasts from the time, and he builds a radio station in real time, just like a modern day radio station. Modern day radio stations has an entire schedule built from 12 a.m. until 12 a.m. the following day of all the music, commercial spots, and stories that are going to be ran throughout the day. Anthony has done the same thing, except for his music comes from the 1940s and 1930s. His news reports are actual news reports that were archived from the 1940s. His sporting events are actually archived from the 1940s. So if you want a very authentic, very original concept way to listen to music and content from the 1940s, head over to WLBN1940sradio.com. But anyhow, thank you guys so much for hanging out with us for another episode. Real quick, as we said, we don't hawk our stuff enough. Head over to Amazon.com, look for Bonsai Cliffs, Desperation Edge, Valor Vault by Dennis Blocker. You can get it on there. Directly off Amazon,
you can also go to my
email
website,
us.
Blocker Books.
Go to Blocker Books.
Yeah, blockerbooks.com. And I've got all my books there. You can click on them and it'll take you right to the Amazon page.
Or email us at email us at mailcall@WTSP World War II. I'll pass it to Dennis. He can get in communicado with you on how you can purchase the book with him directly. And the difference from that is he would have the ability to autograph it, correct?
Yeah.
You have inventory available to you that you could autograph before sending it out?
Yep.
So that'd be a cool way to add to your collection. So go to Amazon, you can get it shipped directly to you. Go to DennisBlockerBooks.com or email us at mailcall@WTSPWorldWar2.com or hit up Dennis at one. He has 2 Instagram pages. You have Dennis Blocker, which I believe is linked on what's WTSP World War II, but then you also have Blocker Books, correct?
Blocker Books, yeah.
And you can private message him that way too if you want to get autographed books sent directly to you. But thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. I know we went a little wry at the end of the show, but that's all right. We can do that here. We have no overlords. We can talk about Viagra if we want to. But thank you guys so much. Go outside, get some sun, go to the gun range, go fishing, go paint a picture, walk your dog.
Yeah, absolutely.
Go do handstands with your kid. Just get outside, enjoy life.
Memories.
And we'll talk to you all in 2 weeks.
This has been a Digital 410 production.